The moment he raised his hand, the fate of an empire shifted, while he still believed it was a harmless cultural event. One misplaced signature set off humanity's most accidentally fortunate disaster. A tournament he never meant to enter, rules he never understood, and a prize he never wanted. Because sometimes the universe hands its greatest destinies to the wrong person. He had come to the station for 3 reasons: to finish his contract, to get paid on time for once, and to leave before anything strange happened. The first reason was already shaky, the second statistically unlikely, and the third had failed the moment the ceiling lights shifted color and began playing ceremonial music he had never heard before. The translation implant in his ear hesitated, clicked, then gave up and labeled the sound as asterisk festive significance pending. That was usually his cue to walk the other way. Unfortunately, the corridor ahead was blocked by a procession of tall, long-eared aliens in layered robes, moving with the kind of confidence that suggested laws would bend for them. He tried to step aside, misjudged the artificial gravity's microdelay, and bumped into a floating terminal that immediately woke up and demanded his attention. "Welcome, honored participant," the terminal said brightly. "I think you've got the wrong guy," he replied, mostly out of habit. The terminal scanned him anyway. Light passed over his face, his hands paused briefly at his stomach as if reconsidering, then seemed satisfied. A form unfolded in the air. Dense symbols rearranged themselves into something almost readable. "Please confirm consent," the terminal said. He squinted. "Consent to what?" "Participation," the terminal answered, which felt unhelpful in a very official way. Behind him, someone cleared their throat. In front of him, the long-eared aliens waited patiently, as if time itself were mildly afraid of interrupting them. He tapped the glowing confirmation symbol, reasoning that this was probably another cultural exchange thing, maybe a quiz, maybe a dance, possibly food. Stations loved that sort of thing. The terminal chimed happily. "Registration complete." "What did I just agree to?" he asked. "May fortune be curious with you," the terminal replied and powered down. That was the first moment he suspected something had gone wrong, but it was a mild suspicion, the sort you ignore until it becomes paperwork. He continued on his way, only to find his route subtly redirected by illuminated floor lines that hadn't been there before. Each turn deposited him closer to a vast chamber humming with restrained energy and anticipation. A voice echoed, layered and resonant, announcing the commencement of the tournament. "Tournament," he muttered, "that's not food." Before he could retreat, a platform lifted him gently into the chamber, where dozens of figures turned to look at him. He raised a hand in what he hoped was a universal greeting and what probably looked like a confession. The first trial began without explanation. Questions were projected directly into his implant, complex philosophical challenges wrapped in ceremonial language. He answered honestly because he didn't know how else to answer. When asked about honor, he admitted he once returned a wallet mostly because it looked expensive. When asked about legacy, he said he hoped to be forgotten quietly. The judges murmured, several nodded. That felt wrong. The endurance trial was worse. He misunderstood the start signal and sat down, assuming it was a waiting period. Hours passed. The others strained, postured, demonstrated impressive biological adaptations. He waited. Eventually, most collapsed from exhaustion. He stood up, apologized, and was waved through with visible respect. "Are you kidding me?" he whispered to no one. Between trials, he noticed her for the first time. She sat elevated above the chamber, posture composed, expression unreadable. She looked human in every way that mattered until you noticed the long ears sweeping back from her hair, elegant and unmistakable. Their eyes met briefly. She smiled, not grandly, not cruelly, just slightly, as if she too sensed the universe was playing a joke and wasn't sure who the punchline was. By the time the day ended, his name, or the closest phonetic approximation the system could manage, had been recorded among the remaining participants. He stared at it in disbelief. "I didn't mean to win anything," he said quietly. The station hummed around him, indifferent. Somewhere above, probability engines recalculated in growing distress. And far too late, he realized he hadn't asked the most important question. What exactly is the prize? He woke up to find that the station had learned his name, which was unsettling because he had not taught it. The walls greeted him politely. The lighting adjusted itself to what it believed was human mourning, which turned out to be aggressively optimistic. A hovering notice pulsed near his bed, informing him that he was still a participant and that refreshments would be provided whether he wanted them or not. "I absolutely do not," he said, pulling the blanket over his head. The blanket disagreed and retracted. By the time he reached the main chamber again, the mood had shifted. The earlier cheer had been replaced by something sharper, quieter, and much more expensive. He could feel it in the way the air vibrated, in the way conversations paused when he passed. He tried smiling at a pair of officials. One stared back as if memorizing his bone structure for later use. A probability display flickered overhead, cycling through impossible numbers. He recognized just enough math to know the machine was unhappy. The next trial involved something called harmonized intent. The explanation arrived through his implant in fragments, most of which contradicted each other. He was told to stand on a glowing ring and think sincerely. That was it. No weapons, no endurance, no riddles, just thinking. "That seems unsafe," he said. The ring lit up anyway. He thought about lunch, then about how he really should have read that consent form, then accidentally about how ridiculous it all was. The ring responded by changing colors rapidly, finally settling into a tone that caused a collective intake of breath from the audience. "That's not good, is it?" he asked. No one answered. Several officials began whispering to each other with the urgency of people discovering a loophole that could ruin their careers. Later, during a recess he did not request, he found himself seated beside the emperor's daughter. This time no distance, no elevated platform, just two chairs that were clearly designed for different species and a mutual lack of instructions. "You are not supposed to still be here," she said calmly. "I keep trying to leave," he replied. "Something keeps congratulating me." She considered that, then nodded. "The systems are very proud of you. That makes one of us." She surprised him by laughing, a quiet sound, controlled, as if laughter were a resource to be managed. "You treat this as a mistake," she said. "Most would treat it as destiny." "I once won a cooking contest because everyone else set something on fire," he said. "I didn't become a chef." Her long ears shifted slightly, an expression he didn't yet understand. "You do not seek advantage." "I seek exits." That earned another laugh. Around them, politics coiled tighter. Nobles debated interpretations of ancient law. Advisors recalibrated forecasts. The machines continued to insist, with growing confidence, that he belonged exactly where he was. The next challenge involved symbolic combat. He was handed an ornate weapon that hummed ominously. He held it upside down. "That end goes away from you," someone whispered urgently. He dropped it instead. The weapon struck the floor, discharged a pulse of energy, and disabled the arena's shielding grid. The trial was immediately suspended. He apologized. Again, applause broke out. "Please stop that," he muttered to the ceiling. By the end of the day, withdrawal was no longer an option. His attempt to formally resign was interpreted as a rare test of humility and added to his score. The emperor's daughter watched him from across the chamber, her expression thoughtful now, less amused. When they spoke again, she asked him a question no one else had. "If you win," she said, "what will you do?" He thought carefully. "Ask a lot of questions," he said, "probably in the wrong order." For the first time, she looked relieved. Somewhere deep within the station, the ancient systems prepared for the final trial. The probability engines recalculated once more, displayed certainty, and were wrong again. By the time the final trial began, he had stopped asking how things worked and started asking whether they could please work later. The station was quieter than before, not peaceful so much as cautious, like an empire holding its breath while pretending it was. His implant informed him that this was a moment of historic convergence. He asked if that meant there would be snacks. The implant paused, then apologized. They placed him at the center of the chamber without ceremony. No weapons appeared. No riddles formed. The emperor sat forward, advisors tense, nobles rigid with expectation. The probability engines glowed a steady, smug color, certain at last. He crossed his arms and waited for something to attack him, interrogate him, or demand a speech. Instead, the system asked him to choose. The words arrived directly, simple and unadorned. Choose whether to accept what had been offered. Choose whether to walk away and fracture tradition. Choose whether to bind himself to an empire he had never meant to touch. He laughed, quietly at first, then louder, unable to help it. "This is the final test?" he asked. "After all that?" The emperor's daughter stood and joined him without permission from anyone. "Choice is the rarest resource," she said. "Our laws were built to protect it, even from ourselves." He looked at her, really looked this time, past the weight of lineage and politics. "Do you want this?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. When she did, it wasn't formal. "I want it to be real," she said. "Not ceremonial. Not inevitable." He nodded. Something in him settled, the constant instinct to step back, to disappear. He realized he had been surviving by accident, but staying would be deliberate. "I don't want power," he said to the chamber. "I don't understand your systems. I trip over important things. I make the wrong choices for the right reasons and the right choices by mistake." A few nobles flinched. One fainted, possibly from tradition shock. "But I won't pretend," he continued. "If I stay, it's because I choose to, not because your machines say I should." The probability engines flickered, recalculated, then dimmed. The silence that followed felt like the universe shrugging. The emperor rose slowly. "Then the trial is complete," he said. "By refusing destiny, you have fulfilled it." "That feels unfairly poetic," he muttered. Laughter spread, tentative at first, then unstoppable. Tension cracked. Advisors exhaled. Laws rewrote themselves quietly in the background, ancient systems updating with visible relief. Later, much later, after declarations and formalities, he barely survived. He stood with her on a quiet platform overlooking the stars. No audience, no ceremony, just the hum of engines and the vastness beyond. "So," he said, "Empress, princess, future political complication." She smiled. "Partner," she said, "if you like." "I think I do," he replied, surprised by how easily it came. He had changed. Not into a hero, not into a ruler, but into someone who stayed when leaving would have been easier. Someone who learned that accidents could open doors, but choice decided whether you walked through. Below them, the station resumed its rhythm. Trade routes recalibrated. Probability engines slept. An empire adjusted its future around a man who never meant to matter, and a woman who finally chose her own path. He glanced at her. "Just to be clear," he said, "if there's another tournament, I'm absolutely reading the forms." She laughed, and for once, the universe didn't argue.